Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by MiloTree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Blogger Genius. This is episode 57. Wow. Before I launch into today's episode with my guest, Deepak Shukla, I wanted to ask those of you who are using both MiloTree and a different pop-up solution on your blog at the same time, because we are rebuilding our email pop-up and we have some cool ideas, but I wanted to run them by you and I wanted to talk to you about your strategy. If you could reach out to me at Jillian at MiloTree.com, I would love to pick your brain. Maybe we could even, get on a call. Okay, I want to launch into today's episode. It is with Deepak, my friend, and we are talking about a really interesting concept, which is how to use LinkedIn to grow your business. Deepak, welcome back to the show for podcast number 3.
Hey, Jillian. Yeah, absolutely. Three's a charm, they say. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, yeah. We were talking again because we're working together, and we were talking about a topic on LinkedIn, and I said we should record this as another episode. So here we are.
Absolutely. Hey.
So first, I wanted to talk about, so we've been working together now for 2.5 months. Yes. And I wanted to do a recap on how it's going and what we're doing and how you see it and how we see it, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think it's a really good topic to explore for your audience. So yeah, we're coming up to the 2.5 month mark, and I think that one of the really interesting things that's come out of the process is what we're in the process of doing now, as we've discussed, is almost doing some refining. So my aim when I came in was to clear up any kind of technical problems that we saw as to the HTML, if there were any broken links, whether internally or links that were going out externally that were broken, doing things that we could do to improve any of the kind of meta text and data on site, as well as, of course, building some fresh links that were industry relevant and continuing in that fashion for your site.
Yes.
And over the we started, so we're 2.5 months in, it's 20th of Jan. So what's been really nice to see is that, if you plug MiloTree into, for example, just an external tracker of showing kind of your organic keywords, as of November 2018, you were ranking for 108 total keywords, and we're now Jan, and it says there's now a total of 207 keywords. There's actually been a kind of, especially at the long tail, has been a significant expansion of the number of keywords that you're ranking for.
Right.
And certainly there's some additional ones that have come up now into the top 10. And I think this was some of the data that we were, of course, discussing on our last call, because now what makes sense, and this is sometimes typical of what happens, is that we see a bump in keywords and the amount of keywords. We're not yet seeing that correspond in terms of, okay, is there a corresponding bump in terms of revenue? And what happens at this stage, as we've just discussed, is, well, let's take a look at the keywords that we're ranking for. And there's a bunch of them. The external tracker picks up 207, which internally means, like, if you look via Google Search Console, this is, how many is it? 1,490, in fact, actually, 1,490 as of today. So what we went through, of course, and this is where, you can probably tell your audience about our conversation, was where we looked at it and started kind of narrowing and refining.
Right.
So then we can look across the keywords and think, well, what are the keywords that are most commercially meaningful from the ones that we're already ranking for?
Exactly. So we looked at it and said there are certain keywords where it's great that we've gone up, but they're not specifically relevant to somebody who is looking for to grow their Instagram and wants a pop-up and has a website and all of the different things that need to be lined up for somebody to purchase our product.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we went through, David and I did, and we said, okay, what are the most relevant keywords for us? And sent them back to you, and now we're hoping to grow those to really
Yes.
get traction under those, because, we blog about a whole host of topics. And while they're relevant, they might not be super relevant for somebody we want. Now what we're looking for are people who want to buy.
Yeah.
People who have a specific problem that we can solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes complete sense. And what typically happens is when you run, let's call it fixes or maintenance from a technical perspective, as well as building initial links, there is in this case, kind of a surge of what could be considered to be the lower hanging fruit or words at the long tail that you begin to rank for. And then it's a case of, as you said, is digging into that, and as you and David have done, and saying, okay, great, these are the keywords that we're ranking for overall. What can we do? Or rather, you just give us the information as to, right, let's narrow things down even further still, and see what makes most commercial sense. Because what will happen often, to anticipate what someone might be thinking in the audience, is that, well, Deepak, you have the original set of keywords and you start kind of ranking, or rather focusing on those. But when you, for example, take a sample set of even, let's just say 10 keywords, in actuality, if they have a search volume of, let's just say 100 to 300 to 500, there'll be all of the kind of long tail keywords around it that, targeting that keyword will help. But also there'll be other keywords you already rank for at some level. So in fixing technical problems and beginning to build kind of links to your site, it will have an overall net effect across a lot of the keywords that you actually, already rank on Google for. And so what that means is, in improving one thing, you may end up improving something that's slightly to the right or left side of it a lot more. And then you begin to adjust once you see, okay, Google is responding really well to these things. And now let's kind of target and drill further still.
Right. So let's steer the ship in this direction.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then we started talking about LinkedIn. And
yes.
I was saying that I am, of course, on LinkedIn, and but I don't think of my LinkedIn profile as a direct way to grow MiloTree. And you said, that like there's an opportunity there. So on my LinkedIn, for example, I have my education and my background, and I am linked to, because of my background, I have links to lots of kind of people who are big in Silicon Valley and stuff like that, but they're not exactly relevant to my customers and to people who, let's say, would be reading our blog. So I've kept it somewhat siloed. And you said that that's a missed opportunity. And so we started to think about this from the perspective of our customers, our users, and to say, is there an opportunity on LinkedIn that we are all missing as publishers, as, mompreneurs, as food bloggers, as small like shop owners? And you said, there is an opportunity here on LinkedIn. And I was just thinking about this as we pressed record, which is, and Deepak, I want your feedback on this. As entrepreneurs, we're always looking for where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
And say in the beginning, the opportunity was on Facebook back in the day when you would post something and it would show to all of your followers.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's dried up. Now you want to reach people, you've got to pay for it. Facebook is going through a lot of changes. Facebook's not the place where, and also ads on Facebook have become very expensive. It used to be that was the opportunity. You get in on Facebook and then even putting money behind stuff, and all of a sudden you'd see this huge return, and that's not necessarily there. An opportunity that I think we as predominantly women entrepreneurs saw, especially as publishers, creators, was Pinterest.
Yeah.
That to us, like men weren't on Pinterest. Businesses weren't really, unless they were like food brands and stuff, they weren't really on Pinterest. And Pinterest for us has been this huge opportunity, both for Catch My Party and MiloTree. And I think what you and I are circling in on is maybe there's an opportunity for bloggers, small business owners, female entrepreneurs on LinkedIn because we're not yet there.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
It does. It makes complete sense. I think that Let's step back a second. LinkedIn has changed dramatically as a platform. It has become a lot more social because they're pushing video, as Facebook are with Facebook Watch. They're attempting to compete with YouTube. The world's kind of accepting that video is almost here, and video is here to stay. So what that means is that LinkedIn has become now more socially driven. It's attracting a lot more people that are entrepreneurs, mumpreneurs. It's attracting a lot of people that are building, independent to small to medium to big businesses, and they're talking a lot more about their personal stories, about their journey, about everything that relates to kind of what they're doing within the world. And it's almost, in some respects, being a lot like Facebook was, but maybe 5 to 7 years ago, where you'd post a status update, you'd post some content, it would get a decent amount of reach. That same thing, and that might be the best kind of number one, avenue for some of your audience to understand that opportunity that we used to see on Facebook is definitely a lot more prevalent on LinkedIn. Whereas Facebook, everybody uses this term, it's pay to play.
Right.
You have to spend money to get your content seen. That's not the case on LinkedIn. If you write good content and you do simple things such as tagging people, I see it still happen, tagging people that, are your friends, or tagging people that have liked your last status updates, or tagging people that, have individually commented, you can get a really, really decent amount of reach. That's something that's really big. And then and this is where it gets really interesting, is in terms of, what LinkedIn is, of course, LinkedIn is probably the most powerful individual business person directory in the world.
Right.
And a lot of people don't really think that of how much data LinkedIn actually holds. If I want to find an individual that is a blogger who, is producing content, I can find that person for free on LinkedIn. Whereas there's no real easy way to do that on any other platform unless you want to pay for the privilege.
Okay.
And you can directly send them a message. So when we think about, of course, now all of your actual audience, and they've got perhaps a fashion site, or maybe there's a cooking site, or maybe you've got an opportunity. For example, I was looking, you've got an opportunity, number one, to use LinkedIn to search. Literally, if you search for the keyword mumpreneur, then you have around 900 results come up. If you search for the word, let's have a look now, because I've got it here in the background, I just want to check. If you search for the word solopreneur, then you have solopreneur. You have several hundred results come up. If you search, and this is the part that we originally made reference to. If you search for the word podcast,
yep,
you have 9,721 results come up.
Wow. Because that's one thing that I want to do is while I have a podcast, I want to be on other people's podcasts that are relevant. I want to be introduced to other people's audiences to provide value, stuff that I know that hopefully can help them, but that also helps me, grow and get a bigger audience and hopefully connect with like-minded people.
Absolutely. Jillian, podcasts are really still at the very, very early stages of their growth, right? If video is now, businesses aren't really savvy to the idea of podcasts, I think, being now. A company would much sooner do video before they do audio. And what's really interesting is that, podcasts are on a huge growth swing.
Yes.
It's still very, very early days, which means that what we're seeing is an abundance of podcast creators who are actually hungry for people to share their story on their podcast.
Definitely. When somebody reaches out to me with an interesting story, I immediately go, please come on my show.
Exactly.
I want to hear it. I want to share it. And I want to learn from you, that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
So in fact, let's talk about this, which is, I do think it is a great strategy to try to get onto people's podcasts, especially in your niche.
Yeah. So you using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is just really simply it's like an Amazon search with additional filters. So for the cost of, perhaps $70 to $80 per month, and, LinkedIn Sales Navigator offer a free trial for the first 30 days, right? So you have the opportunity to run keyword searches. So you can run something such as, simple as, podcast in someone's title, so I ran the search podcast in title. What that means is that anybody who uses the word podcast in their actual title will come up in search. Now that's a search that gave me 9,721 results.
Wow.
So that means, that means there's potentially 9,000, and let's assume that number, is on the larger side. That's probably at least 5,000 people that host podcasts, Jillian.
Right.
5,000.
So I don't know, what is Sales Navigator? So it's a service, and therefore you can search.
Yeah. So you can search basically LinkedIn using a variety of filters. So if I want to find a particular kind of person, what this does is it allows me to search by geography. So I can go. So for example, I'm doing it right now. So I've used the keyword podcast. So what that means, I'm searching for people that have the word podcast in their title, that are based in the United States, that also use the keyword perhaps, entrepreneur, because then they'll welcome any kind of small business owner to come on to talk about their story.
Right.
And that result of itself has given me 551 results, which means that there's potentially, of that, let's just assume even half of that are podcast hosts. That means that there's 250 people currently who are in the United States that are podcast hosts that discuss the world of entrepreneurship. And that's the opportunity. These things will be, I think, as you said, Jillian, you going on to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 podcasts over time is going to add huge value in so many ways. Number one, you get direct exposure to their audience. Number two, you get the opportunity to practice, refine, and build your brand story. Number three, you get links from every podcast that you go on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and the more podcasts you go on, the more people invite you onto their podcasts.
Exactly.
So it snowballs.
Exactly.
So the question then, so if in fact I see a podcast and I go and I look at it and I listen to an episode or so and I go, oh, I want to be on this podcast, let's say. Would you recommend reaching out to them on LinkedIn, or would you recommend sending an email?
Yeah, I think that LinkedIn is probably the most powerful way to do it at the moment, because LinkedIn inbox messages for those who are active on LinkedIn gets a lot more open rates than anywhere else.
Really?
And here's the really interesting thing. Not only can you search people, for example, that have that profile listed as a podcast owner, you can search specifically for people that have posted on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. So I can then just target people that I know that are already active on LinkedIn, and I can directly send them a message. And to take it one step even further, you don't necessarily even need to listen to their podcast until they've actually responded. So what I've been doing, and this is the process that has got me probably onto around 40 podcasts in the last month and a half, Jillian.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't listen until I initially reach out to, so I've got someone in front of me, Errol. He came up in the search, right? Errol's title is entrepreneur, podcast host, and creative director at Errol Helps Entrepreneurs. So I would send a message. The initial message would be, hey, Errol, notice that you're a podcast host and being a business owner, or or loving podcast myself. I just wanted to connect. I hope that's okay. So that could be the same message, right? Hey, Errol. Hey, Heather. Hey, Jason. I noticed that you're a podcast host. I'm always on the hunt to connect and listen to more interesting podcasts. I hope that's okay. Deepak. And a lot of people naturally would say, oh, wow, yeah, of course you can connect. This is my podcast. Here's my podcast, Eric Helps Entrepreneurs. Here's the iTunes link. Have a look and let me know what you think. That's literally a lot of the responses that I get. And it'll be at that stage that then I'll quickly go and have a look at the podcast. I will maybe listen to a couple of bits. I will listen to a couple of bits and pieces, figure out if it's a fit. And then I'll say, Errol, I really liked your podcast. I particularly like this episode. I don't know if it's possible. I'd love to come and explore being a host on your show, a guest on your show. What is it that I could tell that would be useful for you to make that decision? And then they'll directly say, well, this is my audience. This is what I'd want to know. How do you think my audience could benefit? So they ask you the direct questions that you have to answer. And that's the process that I've been following, Jillian. And it was working so well that for the last 3 weeks, I stopped doing any reach out, but I've still been getting responses from past messages that have come in because I was getting overwhelmed with how many positive responses I was getting. And that is a process that anybody can emulate.
Absolutely. So you recommend breaking it down. You don't recommend saying in the first interaction, hey, I see you're a podcaster. I think that this would be a great fit. I'd love to come on your show. Here's what I do. So you wouldn't do it that way.
I wouldn't do it that way for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's perhaps too much too soon.
Yep.
So that's the first thing. Number two, it's always important with any transaction that we do to try and focus on getting initial yeses. Can I connect? Yes. Here's your podcast link. What do you think? It's great. Could I be on your show? Yes. It's so much easier when you start asking small asks before you make the big one. That's the second reason. The third reason, and this is probably the most important reason for your audience, there's a huge element of practicality to it. Your audience will not have the time to go and listen to 200 individual podcast shows.
Right.
And even if you do, what if only 10% of them respond anyway?
Right.
You may as well only focus on the ones that make an effort to accept your connection request, that write a short response saying thanks for reaching out, I appreciate it, and they should be the people that you focus on.
Got it. Yes. That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of being active on LinkedIn, okay, let's say I always use this example. I'm a food blogger, or I'm a beauty blogger, or I'm a teacher, and I do kids activities, or I sell jewelry or something like that. How active do you recommend I be on LinkedIn? And two, can I take my content that already exists and put it on LinkedIn?
So brilliant questions. So number one, how active should you be? I think that you could produce a piece of content each day if you want. And here's the interesting thing, Jillian. When I say produce a piece of content, I mean literally about 70 to 100 words. I don't mean a 2,500 word blog post. I mean status updates.
Really? Okay.
Yes, they work way better than any other type of content at the moment on LinkedIn. So number one, be active every day, or be active every day or two.
Okay.
What I mean with being active is if you can sit down for a couple of hours and produce literally probably 1,000 words of content, but if that's broken down, of course, into short stories, which are 100 words each, that content could last you a month.
Okay.
That's definitely the first thing. That's the first thing that I'd say, that it's less content that you it's much less content than you think, and it's just snippets rather than actual long form content. So the barrier of entry is very low. That's the first thing that I'd say.
Okay.
The second thing that I'd say is that as to the content that you currently have, absolutely, you can repost literally 30 to 60% of your content onto LinkedIn as an article, and then link back to your actual entire blog. You could absolutely do that.
So you're like teasing it and then you're linking?
Yes.
So you're not putting the entire post?
No, because you want people to come back to your website.
Got it.
Yeah. So you could, for example, you could spend some dedicated time and think, right, this weekend I'm going to spend 1 hour just reposting content. And you could probably get through 3 to 5 blog posts in an hour because you're just reposting, right?
Right.
You're shortening it and then you're putting it on. So you could spend maybe several hours getting 20 pieces of content on there. It's a couple of hours, but then it's done. And then the only focus is to produce those status updates, and they get a lot of traction. You get the metrics that LinkedIn provides you. This status update got 3,500 views. This status update got 400 views. The next status update got 900 views, and you will begin to see opportunities open up. So I get people that approach me saying, "Hey Deepak, I'd love to, could we work together? Or what is it that you do? Or I love your status updates." And what this opens yourself up for is influencer marketing, Jillian.
Yes.
And and people are interested in simple stories. You don't need to, you can, if you run a blog about, something to, about arts and crafts for children, then be authentic. Talk about, some of the things that arts and crafts have taught you, about how you are with your own children. If you sell jewelry and necklaces, then you can produce content that's still, and this is the interesting thing. A lot of people are just interested in stories about your personal life and your journey and what you're learning. So if you're thinking, well, Deepak, I don't know how to really talk about jewelry, or you don't even necessarily need to even mention jewelry at all, because people are going to follow you for you and for your life, as well as for your passions on LinkedIn. So you can be so flexible and broad in terms of the content that you want to produce. What I'm saying is you can talk about anything that you want.
That's so interesting. So it does feel much more like Facebook back in the early days.
Yeah, it's really like that now. I generate a lot more business from LinkedIn when I don't talk about SEO.
Interesting. So what will you talk about?
I will talk about stuff that's inspirational. I will talk about stuff that, if I go to my posts, I'm going to quickly
and we'll link to your LinkedIn profile and my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, exactly. So the last one I spoke about was about, let's have a look. So I gave a tip about how to turn video into videos into blogs. The one before that was thanking my team. Another one before that was about, let's have a look, about talking to business owners embracing brand personalization. So I'm talking to, another one was just a quote. So I'm talking broadly within the area of entrepreneurship, but there is no mention ever where I discuss, talk about turning 33 this year. And, that was one of my posts that got, a lot of, let me have a look. Yeah. So one of my most viewed posts is today's thoughts: act like a hustler, work like a dog, operate like a hacker, position like a painter, prepare like an athlete. Let's grow. And of course, I don't expect your audience to write anything like that at all. But the point here is that I don't write anything about SEO. But that's the kind of stuff that will generate traction and have people reach out to me and then ask me about SEO. Because, we're moving into an area where people less and less feel like they're being sold to, and more where they want to work with interesting and inspirational business owners.
I wanted to take a short break to talk about MiloTree. We just rolled out a Shopify pop-up. What that means is you install this pop-up on your blog, and it says shop now, and it has your pop-up and it leads directly to your Shopify store, and it's populated with your most recent products. We will also be rolling one out for Etsy, where it will pop up and say, shop my Etsy store. So be on the lookout for that. If you sign up for MiloTree, you get your first 30 days free. So you can definitely check it out, kick the tires, see what you think. Okay, now back to the show. Now, when you get a request for somebody to who wants to connect with you on LinkedIn, do you always say yes?
I connected with absolutely everybody.
You do?
Always. I think that you can't know, and this is the interesting part, Jillian, and it relates also to podcasts. You can't know who, is within anybody's second degree network.
Right.
So if I'm at a cafe and I'm really friendly to Frank the barista, I should be friendly to Frank the barista, because Frank the barista's uncle could be, the owner of a whole multi-chain retail outlet. Frankie's cousin could be somebody very important. So this principle that we see so often in real life, that you don't know who you're talking to really ever, or you don't know who that person might know, is definitely, one of the biggest reasons I think that we should accept connection requests from everybody. I think that if you have an opportunity, Jillian, to go on a podcast that is nothing to do with entrepreneurship, you should absolutely do it.
Interesting.
Because you can't know who their audience is.
Right.
You can't know what, because it's folly for all of us to assume that our audience are only interested in jewelry, or
right,
are only interested in arts and crafts. They're in, we're weird and wonderful people that are interested in all kinds of things that have nothing to do with, the business that we're in or the service that we offer. Therefore, we should recognize that everybody else is like that. So I've been on podcasts about sustainability and the environment, and I've been on podcasts about, about sports and stuff that's nothing to do with my business. But I know that, based upon what I've seen, I recognize that, the people that listen to this are also, to some degree, probably interested in what it is that I have to offer. And that's for that reason I accept invitations. When I do podcast reach out, I'm happy to go onto any podcast, because I think that, someone somewhere, and the couple of podcasts I've been on that have ended up generating work, they haven't been podcasts that have been about SEO.
I love that. I think what you are teaching me is this idea of openness to opportunity, and that you can't connect the dots until afterwards. And I've talked about this previously on my podcast, which is I tend to want to silo things. I tend to want to silo my LinkedIn from the rest of my business. Like, even in small ways, I don't tend to talk about what I do to the moms that I interact with, because I immediately think, oh, they're not going to be interested in that. Or it's kind of hard to explain what I do. And then people will find out, like moms, let's say, my daughter's school, and they'll be like, wait, you have a podcast, you have a business, you're an entrepreneur? And I'm like, oh yeah, I am. Because I think that one thing I'd like to work on for 2019 is not being afraid to pull my worlds together. And to not, I want things, I think, tied up in like little, I want things in buckets. And I don't think that is helping me.
I think that you shouldn't be hard on yourself. I think it's human nature, especially when, you operated in such a different space before coming into entrepreneurship, and before, launching your podcast, and you're basing that based upon everything that you have seen and understood as being the way that things are done, that what we do here is what we do here. And I think that what that means is exciting, Jillian. There's a huge opportunity for everybody here, because life is the interesting thing, of course, about today is things are moving so quickly.
Yes.
And everything is emerging and immersing and subject to change, that there is no way we can accurately predict where our next win, nor where our next setback, if you will come from.
I agree.
And with that in mind, give yourself every opportunity for success.
I agree. I totally agree. I think about this all the time. I just wrote a piece in my newsletter. And by the way, to get on my newsletter, sign up for MiloTree. You can cancel it, but you'll still be then getting my newsletters. And I wrote about how you don't know where your next win is going to come from. And you need to be open to everything. And that you're right, as things are moving so quickly, you want to be failing, because it means that you are, I call them at-bats, and that you're trying. Yeah. And I think that you're right. And so it's just a whole different way. So one thing we talked about was taking my LinkedIn profile, which is very buttoned down, and you were going to look at it and kind of try to personalize it or give me feedback on it. So I'm curious, ultimately, what you come back with, so that I can start to merge these different personas together. I mean, not that I'm inauthentic in any of them. I'm very, it's too exhausting to not be authentic, to have to keep different, personas alive. But I think that I do need to, to merge things more.
I think that people will find your journey amazingly weird and wonderful. I look at your resume on LinkedIn, and I apologize in advance if I'm going to be oversharing on your behalf.
No, please.
But you've got, I can imagine how I would feel if I received a request from you to be, on my podcast, where it says, "Hey Deepak, I'd love to, if it's of any use, to explore what I've learned on my journey, starting out in Stanford, going to work for Warner Bros. And then Walt Disney, to leaving that all behind, to venture into the world of entrepreneurship, with my family, and everything that's taught me as a woman that's come out from the corporate world, and then gone to launch a interesting, cool little pop-up that serves female business owners. Do you think that might be interesting for us to explore any elements of that on your show? That sounds so powerful to me, Jillian.
It's funny. Hearing it, yes, again, on the inside, I'm like, it's all right. But no, that's nice.
Because then you attract the Stanford crowd, then you attract the then you attract the screenwriters. Because what happens then is you attract all of the other people who would ordinarily never listen to you, because they'd assume that you don't know my story.
Right.
There's no way I can connect with you. And the more that we weave in those different elements of your story,
right,
the bigger your audience becomes.
Right. I think you're right. I think that is really valid. And that's why I would say to everybody out there, if you're listening to this and you're saying, no, LinkedIn isn't my thing, it's not for me, it's not my business people, my tribe is not there, I would challenge you to really broaden it as well, because you're doing then what I'm doing, which is you're narrowing your self-definition. And you're saying, no, I need to be in Facebook groups with other people like me. And it's like, well, wait a second, maybe we all can venture out into areas where there are opportunities.
And you have then the opportunity to bring those people back into your own Facebook group or your own place of power. And the only way that you do that is to go and become parts, intermittently, of other conversations.
Yes. And that you can have all these different pieces to your journey. I think that's probably true. My journey has been, it hasn't been a straight line. And so therefore, I think because of that, it's confusing to me to kind of explain that to somebody. But to embrace that, I mean, you're giving me all these, like, I wish you could see my brain's like exploding right now. But it's about embracing all of those different elements. And, I'm Jillian no matter what. Like, I am who I am, but I have had this varied path. And therefore, I know about lots of different things that I can bring to my story. For example, story. I understand story. And therefore, I can understand, because I was a writer, and I understand story when it comes to selling and marketing.
Absolutely.
And so it's like taking these different components and pulling them together into embracing all the weirdness.
And I would say, by not sharing your story, you're doing not only yourself an injustice, because you have all of this value to add that's come as a consequence of the experiences. And this is for everybody that's listening as well, right? You've all got a story, and you probably listen to Jillian and me, and you think that, well, I've not been to Stanford. I haven't been to Stanford, and I don't have this background, so maybe my story is not interesting. And Jillian will tell you way more about this than I ever could. At the heart of any powerful story, it's the journey that people care about, and where it starts and ends is of lesser consequence than anything else. And we've all got this journey that's our lives. We all should share that story with others, and by doing that, you not just lift up your business, of course, but you lift up people like yourself. You lift up those people who are in the shadows, that are teetering about starting their own business, that are looking for someone they can identify and connect with, that are looking for any means of inspiration. So I would say that by not sharing your story, by not going on to the podcast or the shows, or connecting with people that you look at and overtly think have nothing to do with your audience, that you do yourself an injustice and you do others an injustice. Because as Jillian said, you don't know where your audience actually truly are, because there's still many silent Sallys out there who love what you do but just don't know about it.
Yes. And I think that another thing I am really working on in my own life is when I think I know something in my business and to say, maybe that's not true. So maybe I think I know my audience, right? I think I know you guys who are listening to this podcast. And maybe, but there are outliers, people who I would be really surprised to know they're listening. And so I find that the more I can say to myself, okay, that's a story I'm telling myself, and it fits my narrative, and maybe it's not true, is very humbling and scary, but important to do, is to challenge those assumptions.
Wow. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, Jillian.
And so, I do this again in my parenting with my daughter, because my daughter will come home with like some story of how tomorrow is going to be a horrible day. And I go, wow, that's a really interesting story you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
And to just even make some space around that narrative that my daughter completely believes is true. And we all do this. And so therefore it helps me do it in my own life to go, wow, like if I can point it out for her, I can point it out for myself. So it's just, you're kind of opening my eyes to not just doing things the way that I do it or the way that I think everybody else in my space does it.
And that could be the angle in for all of us. I think that if everybody feels a bit scared or feels a bit insecure, then that can be the story that you can share with others. Because
Absolutely.
Everybody identifies with that.
Absolutely.
Everybody's scared and fearful. And, the more that you are open about those feelings, the more that you win people to your cause, that you have people that empathize with you, that sympathize, that will follow you. And Jillian, we all are, well, I know that you are familiar with, of course, the concept of the flawed hero, and
Yes.
this whole idea of the origin story. And I think that one of the things that I've as well continually tried to challenge is that Deepak, don't make assumptions until you have the data in your hand. Go
Right.
and do 10 seemingly irrelevant podcasts, and then you can truly say that, okay, I see now that this might not be the right path for me. And often we will take a tiny bit of data. LinkedIn is a professional platform. We'll take another bit of data. Deepak, I could never go on a sustainability podcast or a podcast about sports because I'm selling jewelry. And I'll say, well, you know what? There might be a lot of dads who listen to that podcast about sport who would say, you know what, you can't know really how things can evolve and develop. And the smartest and sensiblest thing to do in this world of evolution and adaptation is as you said, Jillian, is to try stuff.
Yep.
Just try.
Try.
And this route to trying, really, to pin it down again in practical terms, everybody's worried. You can sign up for a 30-day free trial with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You can type in a couple of keywords into their search. It's just, if you've ever been on Amazon, if you've ever been on eBay, it's exactly the same thing. Type in the word podcast and send a couple of people the same message, change their first name, and begin to see what happens. And do that. It will take you literally 3 minutes a day to do it.
Yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And so therefore, and then do you pay $70 to $80 a month? Or do you just do it and then cancel and then,
I've signed up for the year. LinkedIn's so powerful for what I do with work. And that search filter is excellent. I would absolutely, and for a long time, to be honest with you, Jillian, I didn't pay because I was like, I don't need LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I don't, and I'm an agency owner, and I was, in the same camp as you. And it was only about 3 months ago that I became maybe 6 months ago, something like that I began using LinkedIn Premium. And since then, I've never looked back. What has been the result? I've been on 40 podcasts.
Wow.
Because of LinkedIn, because of that $70 a month subscription that I pay.
Right. And how many sales did that get you?
We've got, we didn't meet through LinkedIn, I don't believe.
No, you reached out to me, but again, how many clients did those podcasts get you?
Yeah. So that that process has led me to 3 direct clients from actual podcast hosts who've then directly asked me. And it's led to a further 1 more from an audience member. And these are people that, work with me on SEO. So, people consider them to be, 3 or 4, 4-figure deals. And then finally, it is improving our SEO significantly because I'm generating a continual series of decent links from these sites, and still I'm getting more people that are joining our newsletter, that are finding out about our tribe, that personally reach out to me and say, Deepak, I listen to, I go onto a lot of careers podcasts, Jillian, about career transformation, which you could go on because you've changed your career. You've got a lot of advice that you could give to anyone who wants to get into Stanford. You could go on to podcasts about, getting top, college jobs. You could go on to podcasts about creativity and design because of your experiences with, Warner Bros. And Walt Disney and a lot of those audience members. You know what? There's probably quite likely within that there's going to be some of your audience, or at the very least it's going to help you, rank for really important keyword terms, that we're in the process of going through, like Pinterest pop-up tool or something to that effect. So the benefits are both upfront with the direct conversations that you have, but also they serve you over time because, as we also said, podcasts are only growing.
Yep.
That person is only going to have more people that's going to connect with them. You go on to Deepak's podcast, Deepak's going to have another 20 podcast interviews lined up after you. That's of benefit to you.
Yep.
Because more people will find their show, more people will subscribe. So I think that, and you know what? It's quite easy to talk about yourself on a podcast show. Well, it's easier than writing a 4,000 word long guest post or blog post. For many of us at least. So the actual process of getting onto podcasts and sharing things that are true to your story is way easier for many of us to do than asking somebody to write a full 2,000 to 4,000 word blog post.
Yes, and what I would also say is when you're on a podcast, for example, you and I are co-creating this podcast. We both didn't know what was going to happen. We had an idea. We wanted to talk about LinkedIn, but you get to show a different side of you. I get to show a different side of me. If I sat down to write something about myself, it would be my narrative. And here we are writing a narrative together. So you get to see a whole different side.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing that is of benefit to you, and we're co-creating, and hopefully to your audience as well, is that what we have just started implementing is taking the YouTube transcriptions of our of my videos and my podcast, giving it to a writer, and then turning the transcriptions that YouTube generates for free, of course, that have only about 70% accuracy, but turning every video that I do into a blog post based around that podcast. And that is doing wonderful things for our SEO as well.
Interesting. And I have to say out there, if anybody is thinking about starting a podcast, I so recommend it. I really do. It is, I'm going to be at Alt Summit, which is a conference, and my session is going to be about how to start a podcast in a weekend.
Amazing.
And I have to say that I love doing the podcast because I get to talk to people like you. It's very intimate. It's not like I'm having to talk to thousands of people. Hopefully I can reach thousands of people, but it's just you and me talking. And there's something so neat about that. And then being invited into somebody's ears. It's really intimate. It's really, it's like I feel privileged. So if you are at all thinking about it, reach out to me because I will probably be putting my talk online. But I would recommend people take the leap and try it. It's not very expensive. You can do it down and dirty. And I think it's really satisfying from a human perspective, from a connecting perspective.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more.
So Deepak, I have to say, you have really, what I love about you is you open my eyes to stuff. When I talk to experts about other topics, things especially that I know a lot about, I find those conversations very interesting, but also very, what is the bias? Confirmation bias. Which means I hear stuff that I know, it confirms what I know, it solidifies it, and then it's harder to be thinking outside the box.
Yeah. I understand, and I want to, as much as I can, at least come on and try and present you perhaps something that at least hopefully is somewhat unfamiliar to you, because then I know it can impact a lot of the existing bodies of data that you've already got in your mind, as well as hopefully take your audience down some different paths that they haven't yet considered.
Yeah, so if you haven't, anybody in the audience, go to LinkedIn, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, and start poking around and start seeing what it looks like, and start doing some searches and see if there's a way in, because it could be what I would say Pinterest is for men today, which is undiscovered, and it's like a sleeping giant for them. We all know that Pinterest is very powerful, but if you talk to your husband about it, or he'd be like, what is, it's just cupcakes and wedding dresses, and it's not for me. And I have a feeling that there could be that opportunity on LinkedIn for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, there's a huge opportunity on LinkedIn. At the very least, not even at the very least, just sign up for Sales Navigator. It's a 30-day free trial. If you've never used it before, type in the word podcast, type in the word solopreneur, type in any word that you want with anyone you want to connect to.
Yep.
See what comes up, and be surprised, and look at some of the status updates that are in your own feed, and have a look at ones that seem to get comments and likes, and patterns will appear before your eyes.
I love it. Deepak, thank you so much for being on the show again. And you know what? We're going to do this again. If you'll do it. If you'll do it.
100%. These are lots of fun, and I'll do my best to keep trying to bring something that's not yet considered to you and your audience.
I love it. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
If you're liking the Blogger Genius, please subscribe and tell your friends, and I will see you again here next week.